Committee will come back to order. We pause for a couple hours. We have two bills left in front of us. This is our last meeting of this general session to hear bills. And so let's just talk about our time for a minute. So we think about it. So we've got these two bills that a lot of people are interested in both bills. So we're going to try to keep this time. I have right now, are we going back in at two? Okay, so we could probably be a little bit late. So 2:15-ish, so we have just under 2 hours to get these two bills. So I'd like to do like 55 minutes each. So public folks and particularly folks who are online, it's probably going to be pretty tough. So we'll have a presentation of the bill by the sponsor. Then I'll listen to any state agencies or other electeds quickly, and then we'll move to folks who are in favor of the bill. We'll divide the time equally, whether it's 20 minutes for, 20 minutes against, and then we'll work the bill. So that's the plan. We're going to have about 55 minutes. Senator Larson, welcome back to the House. It's House Revenue. We're ready to hear your bill. Senate Joint Resolution 11. Floor is yours.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Dan Larson, Senator, District 19. Good enough? All righty. I'm here to present Joint Resolution 11. It's calling for a convention of states. And so that's what the title is. Obviously, like I said, it's a joint resolution requesting Congress to call a convention for proposing amendments to the United States Constitution as specified. There's a couple whereases in here. I'll go through them quick. Whereas the framers of the Constitution of the United States empowered the state legislatures to be the guardian of liberty against future abuses of the power of the federal government. And whereas the federal government has created a crushing national debt through improper and imprudent spending. Currently, it's over $32.5 trillion. Can't even imagine that. 32.5 million. Just since 2017, when we did ours, it's up about at least 10 trillion. Yep. I just had a comment here, just to kind of give you an idea what a trillion is. If you spent $40 a second, 24 hours a day, it would take you 289 days to spend $1 billion. To spend $1 trillion, it would take you somewhere around 792 years. I mean, you can't even fathom what it is. So we'll continue. Page 1. Whereas the federal government has invaded the legitimate roles of the states through the manipulative process of federal mandates, many of which are unfunded mandates. Or if they give us funds, they take them away later on after you get them enacted. The federal government has ceased to operate under the proper interpretation of the Constitution of the United States. And it says, whereas it is the solemn duty of the states to protect the liberty of the people, particularly for the future generations, by proposing amendments to the Constitution of the United States through a convention of states under the Article 5. The main point of the resolution is on page 2 down at the bottom, section 1. It states that the legislature of the state of Wyoming hereby applies to Congress under the provisions of Article 5 of the Constitution of the United States for the calling of a convention of the several states, that's 34 states, limited to proposing amendments to the Constitution of the United States that impose fiscal restraints on the federal government, limit the power and jurisdiction of the federal government, and limit the terms of the office of federal officials and member of Congress. In section 2, it says the legislature of the state of Wyoming adopts the application made under section 1 of this joint resolution expressly subject to the following reservations, understandings of declarations.
That to us.
Okay.
I think we've all read it.
Okay,
I think
we're good.
yeah.
Okay,
Why don't you go to section 3 there?
do want to make sure that everybody realizes it takes 2/3 to get a call, and they have to all have the same proposal, and it needs to stay the same.
And really just give us a little history. That's what this is about, to make sure the language is similar to what other states, right? Because we've
Yes.
gone there and rescinded and passed it before.
Yeah, I do
think,
want to get to that
sometimes.
too, and I can talk about that here in a
Yeah, no,
minute.
just-
But in 2017, we did pass a balanced budget amendment. We were proposal. There's 28, I think, right now on that. But this is a little different, the topics, and we're actually doing 3.
Okay.
And this particular resolution is has been adopted by 19. And it states the same exact way. So that Congress cannot take this and say, well, they're not reading the same, so we're not going to make the call. And so that's what the intent of this is to make sure that the states are all doing it the same. Section 3, I do want to make sure we don't miss that in the bill. It's a 1 state, 1 vote in here somewhere. There it is on page 4.
Right, page 4.
Section 4, it states in this resolution that it is a 1 state, 1
It's a big
vote.
deal for our state, obviously.
Very big deal.
Yeah,
And currently, I just want to talk about that just a little bit.
sure.
There's 33 states that have less than the average population of if we averaged them out. And I think that's like 7.5 million. 33 states have that. There's 17 states that are above that. Why would we want to go to a convention and have it done by population? It isn't going to happen. The 33 states will never go for that. So if we went to one and they wanted to change the rules, the 33 would just say, we're out of here. And besides that, we've got there's Texas and Florida that have above it, and they already have signed this resolution, and they are agree. We're going to do a 1 state, 1 vote.
Okay.
Also in here, I think it talks about the delegates that we send, and that is determined by the states. I'm not sure exactly where that's at, but it is in the resolution. And I do want to bring up, I did gave us a handout.
Okay.
If you can look at,
Can you hold it up again for us? We have several.
yeah,
Okay.
it'd be this just one with double pages. It has on top of it Article 5, and then it also has statute 922-102. I'd like briefly to go through 922-102. We passed this in 2017. I was luckily one of them, or I brought the bill and proud to bring it. And it's mainly it's the limitation of authority for delegates to an Article 5 convention. And I would like to go through it because it's important. In Section A,
Yeah, it highlights.
Section A, no delegate shall have authority to vote to allow consideration of or approve an unauthorized amendment for ratification to the United States Constitution. B, a delegate shall be directed to vote for procedures and rules mandated convention of states, whereas each state has 1 vote. Any vote made in violation of Section A or B in section shall be null and void, and delegate making the vote shall be immediately recalled and replaced. That's Section C. Section D, each delegate shall be required to take the following oath. And I really would like to read the oath. I do solemnly swear and affirm to the best of my abilities, I will, as a delegate and alternate to the Article 5 Convention, uphold the Constitution, laws of the United States of America and Wyoming. I will not vote to allow consideration of or approve any unauthorized amendment proposed for ratification of the United States Constitution. I understand this and that I accept the penalties and impose any violation of this. There is in Section E, any delegate who violates the oath shall be guilty of felony punishable by imprisonment for 5 years and a fine not more than $10,000 or both. So that is very, very important.
So then G, where 3 House members, 3 senators, but it's still only 1 state vote.
That's
So
exactly
those
right.
6 would have to come to an agreement on the
That's-
aye or a no on a vote.
That's exactly
Yeah.
right, Mr. Chairman, and thank
Okay.
you for bringing that out. So each house is going to vote for 3 members. We haven't done that yet. I'm
But at the
thinking
convention, 1 vote.
that's exactly right. And
Yeah.
and in a convention, the states can send how many delegates they decide they're going to send. But in the rules, the ones I've been to, and I think in the past, they're going to be limited. Because obviously they can only have so much space. And the ones I went to a simulation, we had 3. And I think they limited it to 3. And so there was 150 people potentially. And so you can have all the delegates you want and they'll be up in the balcony. And the public will be in the balcony. The media is going to be in the back. They'll be filming this. Everybody will see what's happening. It'll be the biggest event in forever. But anyway, I don't know what else to say. I got other topics I'd like to go over, but I really would.
Maybe this question for the committee. So the 2/3 to propose this convention. Right? So that's what, 33 states or
34.
34 states.
Can I actually read that? Article 5? I think you guys all have it there.
And then just tell us about then, so that's the 2/3 to propose. We all know the Constitution, but then to ratify.
Ratified's 38 states. If they come out with a proposal, they might come
Right.
out with one. I don't know if they'll come out with more, might not
Same
come out
rules
with
as
any.
always to ratify.
Yep, but to ratify, it's 38 states. It'll be, Congress will decide if it's by legislators of the 38 states or if it's by a convention of the states, party or I'm gonna have to have help on that one, but we have done that once, I think, in the past, where the conventions are called within the state. And we adjusted that in the bill I brought in 2017 on how the conventions are run.
Okay.
But it can be one of those two ways Congress will decide. Also, Congress to decide when we get to 34, which we've never met. And there's a reason why that is. Congress does not, the feds don't want us to know we have some power. They don't want us to even be close to bringing a proposal because it's probably going to be a better proposal than they're going to bring.
Hey, let me just go to any members now. Have any questions of the sponsor on the bill? Any parts of the bill you have questions about? Okay, I appreciate anything else in your presentation of the bill because we're going to move on to public
I
comment.
would like to probably let the public comment go. I got lots of things I could talk about, but if I could, Mr. Chairman,
Sure, yeah.
I had brought 2 other
Well, and
people.
they're going to
that
be part of the public comment. Yeah,
are- Okay,
that'll be how that'll.
are they welcome to go ahead?
Oh, absolutely. Once
Okay.
I'm just want to make sure you're done.
I can be done. I
Okay.
got lots more, but I'll
Sure.
let them go.
Okay, so we're gonna, is there any other elected kind of governor agencies? I don't see any in the room. Okay, so we're gonna move now to public comment. Okay, and so how this will work, we're just gonna go 20 minutes for folks who support the proposal. And then my alarm will go off and we'll wrap it up. And then there'll be 20 minutes for those who are opposed. Now, we could spend all day tomorrow, the next day and the next day, right? But we just don't have the time. And so, and now this works. One person could talk for 20 minutes. Or 20 people can talk for 1 minute. And it's going to be your choice how you use your time. And so, and then I would just suggest when you're finished, go ahead and leave the chair so somebody else can fill that chair and we'll just move as fast as we can. Okay, go ahead, Senator. What do you have?
Comment. I'm sorry. I would like to say that our 4 people that were in our position before have brought quite a few proposals. And I just wanted to make sure everybody realized that. In 1939, we had an income tax limit 2 that they had brought that they wanted to join in a convention. They in 59, they had limited federal powers they wanted to talk about. In 61 and 79, they wanted to talk about balanced budget. In 63, they wanted to talk about the Supreme Court things that they were doing at that time. And then 63, they had another one and another one in 63. But in 2017, they rescinded, or 2009, I think they rescinded them all
of them, yeah.
except the one we passed in
You know, and
2017.
it's a good reminder, I think, to all of us in this room and, you know, all these core issues of the state, we're not the first people to talk about them and we won't be the last. So
No,
just pretty soon we'll be all those dead guys on the wall out there.
That's
And
right. I
There'll be
just
other
wanted to
people
make
talking
sure
about it.
that Wyoming has proposed these before. We should not be scared.
So we'll just keep working it.
Okay.
Okay, we're gonna move to public comment. All those folks in favor are gonna start first. I'm gonna start my timer and go ahead and introduce yourself. Who wants to start? Okay, go ahead, introduce yourself, who you represent, where you're from.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Mark Meckler. I'm the president of Convention of States Action, and I'm a resident of Texas. And I'm here representing the millions of folks across the country that are looking to call this Convention of States, and also the tens of thousands here in your great state. We sit at a crossroads in American history where the federal government has usurped the power of all the states, and specifically your great state. They own a huge chunk of the land in your state. On average, state budgets are 65% controlled by the federal government in one way or another with some form of strings. And this is antithetical to the form of government proposed by the framers of the Constitution. We're blessed because the framers were prescient and they gave us Article 5, and specifically the second clause of Article 5, because they understood human nature. Human nature naturally centralizes power. And so they were given power, and they have centralized that power to a great degree. In 1789, when the Constitution was ratified, it was ratified providing for 17 enumerated powers of the federal government. And those framers said that those powers were limited, enumerated, and the powers that you all were supposed to have in the states were unenumerated and unbounded. Essentially, everything else went to the people in the states. Of course, today it seems like the federal government, and I'm exaggerating, it seems like they have 17 million powers now, mostly granted by the federal courts, overreached by the government, and then enforced by the federal courts. So today we have the opportunity to do something extraordinary, which is to step into the place that the framers created for us, to call for a convention of states to propose amendments. And I want to pause there and focus on that language for a moment. The convention itself has no legal authority other than to propose amendments. I like to call it a suggesting convention. So men and women from all over the country, appointed by great state legislatures like yours, will gather, will debate, and we'll make some suggestions to the states. And if 26 of the states can agree on a suggestion or a group of suggestions, then those suggestions will be sent out for ratification to the states. And then it takes a super majority, 38 states, to ratify anything that comes out of convention. I would say the primary objection I hear to what we're undertaking today here in this legislature, and we passed in 19 other legislatures around the country so far, is the idea of what people call a runaway convention. The idea that the delegates who are charged by you and commissioned by you, and in your state under penalty of law, are told the limited amount of things they're allowed to do, are going to go there. They're going to violate their oaths. They're going to engage in behavior that could cause them to be recalled by your legislature. But if not recalled, theoretically, and this is the fear, they could propose, for example, the repeal of the Second Amendment. This is the one I hear most commonly. So that's why I use that as an example. Today in the United States of America, there are 25 states which have constitutional carry, permitless carry of a firearm. They're actually, Florida will be the 26th here in the next couple of weeks. There are 24 states where you can carry your handgun into the state legislature. And believe it or not, there are 14 states where you can take a loaded long gun, put one in the chamber, sling it across your back, and sit in the gallery and watch the proceedings. I'm not saying that's a good idea, but that's allowed in 14 states. It's important when we do the math that we remember if it takes 38 states to ratify, it takes only 13 states to stop anything that we wouldn't like. In reality, how legislatures work, it takes only one house in each of the 13 states to stop anything we wouldn't like. And structurally, procedurally, the way a state stops an amendment from being ratified is that the legislature does nothing. Literally, you don't bring it up in a committee, you never debate it, you never discuss it, you just let it die. And so I would posit to you the idea that we could get something really wild proposed, left or right, frankly, and ratified by 38 states, just it flies in the face of logic and math. There is nothing that we could think of that's radical one way or the other that could not be stopped by 13 bodies in the 50 states. There are 99 total legislative bodies. We need only 13 bodies to stop it. So the idea of a runaway convention is fallacious, and it is intended to keep people like us from utilizing the tools that the founders gave us in order to preserve the Constitution, tools that are part of that Constitution. I also hear, I'm going to address just a couple more things and then I'll close. I hear regularly that, well, we've had one constitutional convention in American history, 1787. This, of course, is not a constitutional convention. It's an Article 5 amending convention. But I hear that that convention ran away. And I want to put that myth to rest. I think it's really important. The founders and framers, many of them in that convention were men of honor and virtue. A lot of us would agree with that. And the idea that they just simply threw away their oaths and did whatever they wanted is an outrageous slur. And I have read, and you can read their commissions that give them their authority. And those commissions say that they have any and all authority necessary to render the federal constitution adequate. So they had unlimited authority when they went into that convention. Madison spoke about that afterwards. You're going to hear a lot of hyperbole about the things Madison said. They're mostly taken out of context, to be honest with you. I'll close with this. This procedure was given to us by the framers of the Constitution for a time such as this. On the floor of convention on September 15th, 1787, Colonel George Mason rose and he addressed the men assembled. So this is 2 days before the end of convention. They were virtually done. And he stood and he said, we've made a mistake. In this document, we gave the power to Congress to propose amendments, and we didn't give the power to the people acting through the states. And he asked a question, are we so naive that we believe that a Congress and a federal government that become tyrannical will ever propose amendments to restrain their own tyranny? Now, I imagine they laughed because human beings don't restrain their own tyranny. It's not human nature. We don't have a videotape, but we do have, in fact, Madison's notes. And at that point, they say 2 Latin abbreviations, nin com. That stands for no comment. In other words, there was no debate. And these are men who debated everything. They debated how to debate. But on this point, there was total agreement. They proposed language and they unanimously adopted this clause into the Constitution. It's the only thing I'm aware of that was proposed and adopted unanimously without debate. They were looking forward to the future at a time when it would need to be used. And they gave you, the state legislatures, the power. They gave you that power because they were you. Most of them had served on town councils and in colonial legislatures and in legislatures under the Articles of Confederation. And it's not that they thought you would be better or wiser people than the federal government. It's that they knew you would be closer to the people. And I can tell you, having traveled to 48 states and been in the legislatures in most of them, I actually have great faith in the state legislatures. I think the best of America is seen on our state legislatures all over the country. And I ask that you pass this resolution out of committee and allow people of the great state of Wyoming a full debate on the floor. And I'm happy to stand for questions, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Meckler. Okay, Representative Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. John Adams said our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people, and it is wholly inadequate for the government of any other. You mentioned quite often the high morality of the original framers of our Constitution. And then I see this, which was handed out, this Wyoming statute 9-22-102, which limits the delegates that we would send from the state of Wyoming. You mentioned the unlimited powers of those original delegates. Why do you suppose we need to have this statute in place today? And does that impact what a convention might look like?
Mr. Meckler.
Mr. Chairman, Honorable Representative Bear, I appreciate that question. My honest opinion is we don't need this statute. My honest opinion is the delegates are already limited as a matter of common law under the common law of agency. Most folks in here have done business. You've hired an insurance agent. The agent has only the authority with which you imbue them. If they were to try to bind you for a policy greater than that which you had contracted for, that would be non-binding. It would be a null vote. That the same law of agency applies to the agents that you will appoint to act on your behalf. Many states pass these pieces of legislation, what I call delegate limitation acts, because they feel better. They're nervous about something like this. They want to know that they can impose criminal penalties in the event, and they're also trying to assuage constituents that have concerns. So my personal opinion is that these delegate limitation acts are unnecessary, but I understand why they make people feel better.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Meckler, you mentioned that you didn't think anything radical would pass. And we just talked about the morality. What I was trying to intimate is the change in morality in our culture. I think there was quite a bit of information given about how quickly our deficit is growing. And I tie that directly to our morality. When a government spends money erratically and irrationally, it is a way of imprisoning the people. So we have a government and we have a society that has allowed this to happen. My personal belief, that's a degradation in our society's morality. And I think that this particular statute in the Wyoming statutes is probably necessary for that reason. And it has teeth in it. So having said that, is a balanced budget a radical thing?
Mr. Chairman, Honorable Representative, I don't believe it's a radical thing, but more importantly than me is the opinion of the population of the United States of America. That's an issue that's been pulled consistently for about 30 years now. And the percentage of the American public in favor of some form of balanced budget amendment is run consistently 80 to 85% over the last 30 years. So I would say when you have an 80 to 85% majority is in favor of a particular proposition, I would like to see that imposed on the federal government by the people, that's not a radical idea.
How many states have balanced budget requirements?
At last count, and I may not be exactly accurate, but I believe it was 41 states have some form of balanced budget amendment imposed on them.
Okay,
49, I'm sorry.
49, that's the number. Okay, Representative Locke has a question. Now, I just want to remind everybody, 9:22 left in this. We're moving, so.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I just want to ask a question. So going through this, you talked about federal government overreach. So question I have is, do you perceive that the issue is federal government overreach, or are we dealing more with states' comfort and to comply? That's what a question I would really like to understand, what the perception and where the break of this is, because that's certainly core to this whole discussion, in my opinion, at least.
Mr. Chairman, Honorable Representative Locke, my opinion would be it's both. Over a long period of time, we have had federal government overreach. The federal government started to grow really dramatically in 1913. A bunch of things happened in 1913, the Fed, the 16th Amendment, 17th Amendment. Those things in many ways neutered the authority of the state governments. The federal government was never intended to have a direct relationship with the taxpayer. That was supposed to be mediated by the states. 17th Amendment removed the state's authority over the federal government directly in a federal legislative body. And so I think at that point, the states sort of became secondary to the federal government. And I would argue, and I think you're pointing at something correct, I think a lot of states have become comfortable with being in a secondary position to the federal government. And I think that's one of the reasons this is so important, because this is a chance for the states to say, you know, we've decided we don't like this so much. We've seen the results of this happening since 1913. The results aren't good, and we want to stand up and say no.
Turn my mic on. Appreciate your testimony.
Thank
And
you,
I'll
Mr.
move
Chairman.
on to next. And if you gentlemen would vacate your chairs, others can fill those chairs. Go ahead. You want to introduce yourself, Mr. Galios?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Sam Galiotis, and bringing it a little bit closer to home. I'm a Wyoming native, a businessman, an active community member, and a father of 2 Wyoming teenagers whose future in this state concern me based on the negative impacts of our state experiences at the hands of Washington, D.C. Like many, I'm heavily tenured, invested in our great state, emotionally, physically, spiritually, and financially. I encourage this committee to pass SJ 11 so that it can be debated on the floor. It's no secret, as we've just spoke about, our federal government has put us all into a fiscal nightmare. And that is the truth. While trampling on Wyoming state rights over and over again, I've watched and listened while you, this body, and other state leaders have labored over the damage from the unilateral decisions out of Washington that have caused hurt to Wyoming's economy. Washington, D.C. is past self-correction at this point. It's time to take action. Our fiscal situation and the mitigation of state rights will get even worse unless the states take action to restore balance with the feds. This legislative body, along with its counterparts across the nation, have an opportunity to set things right. The solution is made available to us, as we've been speaking about, through Article 5 of the Constitution. And you are the only ones that can help make this happen. Wyoming needs to stand up, be counted, and help set the course right. I have watched discussion on this topic over the past few years, and I must say there's a great deal of misinformation, misunderstanding, and frankly, misrepresentation related to an Article 5 Convention of States. Mr. Chairman, I make one simple request of all of you. Please listen carefully to what's been said today regarding this initiative. Allow the facts to see sunlight and follow in the footsteps of 19 other states who have joined in this cause. If you do, I believe you will come to the same conclusion I have come to. And that is this initiative is our best chance to set things right for the state of Wyoming. Thank you.
Any questions of Mr. Galiotis? Thank you for your testimony. Representative Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here, Mr. Galiotis. Mr. Meckler had mentioned that there's polls that show that 80% of the American people would like to have a balanced budget. Why do you think that these same 80% have continued to elect officials to our federal government that have allowed us to get into this budget mess?
Any opinion on that?
Yeah, I don't know that I would have a qualified opinion, Mr. Chairman, but to answer the question, I think that's part of the problem of Washington, DC and having the same people there year after year after year after year.
Sure. Okay, thank you for your testimony. Appreciate you being here. Go ahead. You're next. Introduce yourself, please. Thank you for your testimony.
Yes, my name is Paul Crouch. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for this hearing to discuss SJ 11 Convention of States Resolution.
Who do you represent and where are you from?
I'm from Laramie, Wyoming, and with Convention of States.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Thanks for being here.
You bet. SJ 11 is about proposing amendments to our federal constitution. We hear arguments for this resolution in this hearing today. Some are quite compelling, but there is opposition to this Convention of States resolution within our local GOP party and maybe within the minority party. I think everyone agrees there is a perception that our federal government does not follow the Constitution in many areas that affect the state level. Perception is reality, to quote a cliche. The issue is that many interpret this pocket constitution in different ways. Let me address these competing sides of the argument, and I wish to use an analogy, if I may. In doing so, I'm going to discuss two subjects that I've been told to avoid: religion and politics. I also have a pocket Bible, and many interpret the Bible in many different ways. Now, how are these related? Let me discuss some of my personal experiences. I can remember when I attended college, I was studying in the student union, and various religious groups would approach me and try to convince me on various doctrinal issues. Is baptism necessary to be saved? How often should we take communion? Should we have piano music in church? Some of these questions, if not all, can progress to divisive and bitter debates. As I have grown older and I've seen what my children have been exposed to in secular colleges and even religious seminaries, they have been taught that all religions lead to the same outcome. This is a whole new ballgame. So do Christians, Islamists, Buddhists, and Hindus have the same constitution, if you will? No. They have different Bibles or constitutions. So suddenly I realized that what I once vehemently argued in my college days was not as important as the bigger picture. What I'm saying here is our differences are small that we have amongst ourselves about the effectiveness of returning the state's power through amendments. It is preferred over the left's radical agenda to rewrite the Constitution. We appear to want the same outcomes. The question is, what method should we use to accomplish this? We both want the federal government to follow the Constitution. What we have to realize that we need to come together on a workable and legal solution to curb the federal powers and restore state powers. The Convention of States solution is to amend our Constitution to correct past Supreme Court rulings that have permanently expanded the federal powers over states' rights. The Supreme Court, through their court decisions, have essentially made soft amendments. Okay. The Article 5 Convention of States method is a safe, legal, peaceful, and constitutionally sound method. I think the opposition's method is nullification, which is not in our Constitution. This method, the last time it was tried, led to a civil war. And I don't think any of us wants to put the country through that again. We urge you to see the big picture and
I'm gonna-
support SJ 11.
Hey, any questions for Mr. Crouch? Quick question here.
So you made a statement that clearly the government is outside the bound, in your perception is they're outside the bounds of the current constitution. And we, the states, clearly, or it appears, don't look like we have pushed back. So what is this event? Why is this going to be different in terms of the states taking back their sovereignty from that perspective? And how does this actually change a government that says that document? Well, my interpretation is that's not true. Just using that as an example. Thank you.
Crouch?
Sure. Through the chairman, through to the representative. Yes, I believe that an amendment, the Supreme Court follows the law. But they've made the decision to, like the Commerce Clause. The Commerce Clause was interpreted very differently the first 100 years of our country than it is in the second 100 years. Okay, if we make an amendment to restrict the Commerce Clause, the Supreme Court will have to follow that amendment.
I'm gonna move on now. You're the last one and you get 1 minute. Okay, so briefly introduce yourself and
For a greater part of a
is your
decade
mic
now.
on? Is your mic on there?
Let me just be closer. My name is David Montano. I've been a Wyoming resident for the greater part of a decade now. I'm a Florida native and the son of immigrants that escaped communism and despotism. As a Christian, a father, a husband, and a veteran, I am set on doing what I can to ensure that despotism does not encroach on our way of life here in the United States of America. I think we only need to look to the founding of this great nation to understand the gravity of this legislation. The founders were in a position that few in the history of mankind ever were. That original position of being able to constitute for us all a government that serves the polity and not itself is rare. We find ourselves here today to discuss the opportunity to take part in maybe not the constitution of a new government, but the amending of the very document that constitutes the one we already have. That too is rare and is an opportunity that we should not squander. The justifications and reasons to limit the power and scope of our federal government should be clear to everyone. The runaway debt, the legislative deference to the executive branch, the corporate regulatory capture that we see, or I think the coercive nature of cooperative federalism are just a few that I can enumerate quickly. It is for these reasons that I encourage the passing of SJ 11.
Thank you. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Now, you're in Laramie?
No, sir, I'm
Cheyenne?
here in Cheyenne.
Okay, great. We appreciate you. Any questions? Okay, appreciate your testimony. Thank you for, okay, members, and audience, we're gonna move now. Folks who are opposed to this resolution, if you just fill these chairs and I'm gonna start my timer and you'll get your 20 minutes. We appreciate you all being here. Okay, go ahead. Introduce yourself, where you're from, who you represent.
Thank you, Chairman Harshman. Members of the committee, my name is David Iverson. I live in Buffalo. Something very important was just said by the previous speaker, that they don't follow the Constitution right now. And I think that many of us would probably agree that there are many things at the federal level that are not, they're done, that are not in the Constitution. So let me ask you a question. Why would they follow another amendment to the Constitution? Just because we say we really mean it now? I think we all know that if we just add another amendment to the Constitution, it's not going to solve the problem of them not following it. I'd like to be brief and just bring up 3 quick points. There is only one sentence in any of our founding documents that refers to the Article 5 Convention, and it's in the Constitution in Article 5. Just one sentence. Now, you've already heard a lot of stuff about how this thing is going to work and how the rules are going to be set. But if there is only one sentence in any of our founding documents, that means that there aren't any rules written right now. Now, let me give you 2 examples of why that's a problem. Well, if this Article 5 convention starts, then the rules will be set once it opens. You all know this because the very first thing you debated when the 67th legislature started was the rules. Now, you could have passed a rule that everybody had to wear green jackets and pink shoes. And if that rule passed, that's the way it would have, everything would have to be done on the floor. Another example, about a year and a half ago, you all had a special session. The one purpose of that special session was to discuss mandates, vaccine mandates. There were several other bills that were proposed, one of which was a gambling bill that was debated on the floor. So what leads you to believe that any of these issues that are brought up in this resolution will be the only ones debated at the convention? I don't think that you can be certain of that at all. The second thing I'd like to bring up is this one state, one vote idea. Because all of the rules of the convention will be set once it opens, there's no guarantee that it will be one person, one vote. Again, whomever attends this convention could pass a rule that maybe it's 3 votes per state. Excuse me, 1 state, 1 vote is what I meant. And the reason you know that to be true is because the first constitutional convention went off the rails. Now, a previous speaker called it an outrageous slur and fallacious. It's neither of those things because it actually happened. Before I walked into this room, I looked up the National Archives website, and the very first thing under constitutional convention said that they convened a convention to revise the Articles of Confederation. That was the call of their convention. Now, they went way beyond that, and thank God they drafted the Constitution. We lucked out on that one, but I doubt very seriously that it will happen again. The analogy of an insurance agent not being able to go outside of their duties is an incorrect analogy, because an insurance agent is bound by criminal law. If they violate the law, they're held liable. There's nothing here that is going to hold any of these documents liable for anything. The last thing I would like to bring up real quick is that you are putting the people in charge, the people that caused the problem, in charge of the solution. Members of the committee, we don't have a problem with the Constitution. We have a problem with politicians. We have to solve the politician problem, not the Constitution problem that doesn't exist. Thank you, and I'll take any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Okay, appreciate you being here today. Okay, next, go ahead. Now, if anybody has a phone that is not, go ahead and take your phone out. Yeah, shut it down. Thank you. That's a reminder to all of us. I'm taking mine right now. Okay, thank you. Okay, introduce yourself. Welcome.
Mr. Chairman, committee, my name is Dan Sobrowski. I'm from Casper, Wyoming. I'm a precinct person, District 8-5. I'm also a founding member of Liberty's Place for You, a political group dedicated to educating the public on issues. So I bring up our group because we hold 3 to 4 town halls a year on issues of the day, whether it's our county or the state. We did have a town hall last year on the dangers of a convention of states, Article 5 convention of states. I also attended 2 of their town halls that they had put on, and by invitation, because this is a harsh topic between both entities, and we can get pretty hard on each other, but we both have a desire to maintain and protect our freedoms and liberties. So it's something I hold dear, that we work together. We may not agree on these solutions, but we need to come together on the ultimate idea here. But that being said, I'm against this idea. And there, 8 or 9 years ago, a book came out by a pretty well-known conservative commentary person. And I don't want to say his name or the book because I don't want anybody to go get the book. I bought the book when it came out, and you couldn't knock me off this idea after reading that book. I wanted so badly for everybody to understand that a convention of states was the only way to fix our problems. But after a year of that and looking deeper, and one of the main things that knocked me off that horse finally was the understanding, and it comes from my own belief system. And what I learned from homeschooling our own kids, that those founding fathers were men of what, and it's been said before, high honor, huge virtue, and they were very godly men. Most of them. There was a small handful that weren't strong believers in God with a strong faith, and everything they did in prayer. Even their arguments, during the Convention of States, their arguments, they would go into prayer sometimes when it would get ugly. We don't do that. When I can, I attend a prayer meeting here in the Capitol before session. And at the most, there's 10 or 12 people at that prayer meeting. We are not sending men of high honor and high valor to the level that our founding fathers were, that they put what they were trying to do, they put in the hands of God. And at that time, the culture was not about kicking God out of schools and a sexual debauchery revolution. Our country is in moral decay. And if we think God is going to be involved in a current Convention of States, we're out of our minds. We cannot open the Pandora's box that would be revisiting that document. We have got to protect it. We've got to start. The way to fix the U.S. Constitution is start in our own backyards, our own communities. Start with your own hearts. What do you believe in the Constitution? Get things corrected at your own local levels, in your state levels, and if we do that as a people, we'll correct the federal level. So I just ask you to look at this very carefully, and if you can, vote no. Thank you.
Mr. Sabrowski. Okay, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Okay, next, go ahead, welcome.
Thank you, Chairman Harshman, Committee. Marguerite Herman. I'm here for the League of Women Voters, nonpartisan group. And what I'm going to be doing is talking to you about our national organization position on the Convention of States. It's not going to be a Wyoming-centric version of things. It's going to be sort of principles taking a national viewpoint, which will become apparent very quickly. So our National League got together in 2016 and saw that there was a lot of interest in this. And this is and what they say is that's fine, but here are the caveats that would make it to avoid the pitfalls that you've heard a little bit about today. I'll try to be as quick as I can. The League is concerned there are many unresolved questions about the powers and processes of an Article 5 Constitutional Convention. The League believes that such a convention should be called only if the following conditions are in place. The convention must be transparent and not conducted in secret. The public has a right to know what is being debated and voted on. Number two, representation at the Constitutional Convention must be based on population rather than one state, one vote, and delegates should be elected rather than appointed. The delegates represent citizens, should be elected by them, and must be distributed by U.S. population. Voting at the Constitutional Convention must be by delegate, not by state. Delegates from one state can have varying views and should be able to express them by individual votes. The Constitutional Convention must be limited to a specific topic. It is important to guard against what has been termed a runaway convention. I know some people have problems with that term, but we all know what they're talking about, which considers multiple issues or topics that were not initiated by the states. Only state resolutions on a single topic count when determining if a convention should be called. So that if you have, it has to be a critical group, mass of states on a particular topic. I've heard calls for conventions based on the ballot budget amendment, on Citizens United overturning that. And I even heard a few earlier in today's testimony. So that should be, it should be an agreement to come together on a topic. And if there's sufficient interest in a particular subject to call a convention, and if it enhances citizens' interest and participation in the process, because we view that engagement as very basic to the legitimacy of the effort. And that concludes my comments. And once again, this was adopted by the by the National League of Women Voters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Ms. Herman, you said that's the National League of Women Voters. And so the stance is that they're against the one state, one vote. Is that accurate?
Mr. Chairman, yes, they believe it's a population-based process and should be, first of all, the representative should be elected, and they should be elected based on a population, one person, one vote kind of idea, because it's the citizens doing the actions, not the discrete states.
Very good. Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, I mean, I know it's just your opinion, but briefly, like, what do you think about that? And how do you think that would serve Wyoming?
Mr. Chairman. And you know what? And Mr. Chairman, I'll tell you, I've thought about this repeatedly, you know, because the league is also interested in the Electoral College, which again is extremely unfair because states of small population, Wyoming is always the poster child for that. How egregious is it? Well, look at Wyoming and versus California, New York. And I frankly think it should be based on, one of the basic tenets of the League of Women Voters has been one person, one vote. And so I remember during the redistricting process that there was talk about, well, do we really have to do that? Can't we just give every county their own rep at that sort of thing? And I think we stood dead against that. One person, one vote. It's proportional representation, especially when you're rewriting a constitution, proportional representation for the effort. So. Okay. Thank you, Mr.
Anyone
Chairman.
else want to speak against this resolution? Got a few minutes here. Okay, I think is there anyone online to speak against it?
Mr. Chairman, I have 4 people online with their hand. Oh, I have more than that now. I'm not sure who's for and who's against. Do you
So
want
we're
me
at
to?
the point where it's just against. So can they hear us online? I'm supposed they can. So if we're just taking testimony against the resolution right now.
Mr. Chairman, I lowered everyone's hands. I'm asking only those that opposed to raise their hands. Mr. Chairman, I have 5 hands up. Do you want me to admit all 5? Mr. Chairman, I'm admitting Barb Luthi. Ms. Luthi needs to turn on her mic and her video.
Hello, can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay, we can we can see it. Go. And so we just have a few minutes left. You've heard, we've got about 5 minutes left on those folks who are against this resolution. And so if you would just introduce yourself, your name, who you represent, where you're from, where you're currently located today. Thank you.
Yes, my name is Barb Luthi. I represent myself. I am in my house in Cody, Wyoming.
Perfect.
And I am against this resolution. Some of the reason, there's a lot of time spent on the whole process, but my focus is actually human nature. And if it is our human nature to kind of gain more control, overstep our bounds, break the laws, and if there are no consequences to those actions, then by human nature, we will continue in those actions, overstepping our bounds, breaking laws. And I feel that our federal government has overstepped its bounds, broken the laws, not followed the Constitution, and we have not applied consequences to those actions. And until there are consequences to those actions, really passing more rules will not make any difference. And it's really up to we, the people, to understand the rules and to know the rules so that we can hold our representatives accountable. And we hold them accountable by knowing how they vote and being able to vote our representatives out every 2 years. So our representatives are a reflection of the people, as it should be. Our vote is a term limit. And as far as maybe even they proposed term limits to our Supreme Court justices, well, they're only in there under good behavior. So if we feel that they have not acted appropriately, then they should be off of the Supreme Court. So those are term limits. And our senators used to be appointed by state legislators. So our state legislators could hold our senators to term limits. So I'm against even term limits. I'm also against a balanced budget amendment, and that if there is no budget in the Constitution, there are already limits on the spending. And if we did have a balanced budget amendment, basically we would be codifying unconstitutional spending. So I would ask that you vote against this resolution and that we look at doing more nullification, as I said, stopping legislation that is unconstitutional by doing nothing or saying, no, we will not comply. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Any questions for Ms. Luthi? How's the snow up there in Cody?
Oh, it's already come down and it's really cold.
Same here. Okay, thank you for joining us. Appreciate it. Okay, we have about 1 minute and 20 seconds. If we've got one more person that wants to speak opposed to the resolution, we could zoom them in here.
Mr. Chairman, I'm admitting Julie Baker.
Julie Baker? Is that what you said?
Yes.
She's not against it, though.
Oh, we're taking folks who are against it.
She had her hand up. I'm sorry. I have an Eldon Stahl with his hand up.
Okay, that'd be great. And we've got about 45 seconds. It's hard to limit this because everybody's impassioned, but we just, so we appreciate y'all being here. We can feel your energy out there.
Okay, can you see me, hear me?
Yes, good afternoon. You got about a little less than a minute. So if you'd be brief, introduce yourself, where you're from, who you represent.
Yep, Eldon Stahl, Evanston, Wyoming, representing myself, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Just touch on a few things with limited time. It was mentioned that, oftentimes the convention supporters, they agree. They say, hey, the Constitution's not the problem. But they say, well, there's all these bad Supreme Court decisions that have been made. And what we need to do is change the Constitution to correct those. Well, let's think about that a little bit. How many bad decisions has the Supreme Court made over the years? I don't know, a lot. And so we're talking about a big revision of the Constitution, honestly, with this, if that's what we're trying to do. But oftentimes they say, well, don't worry, 38 states would have to ratify anything that would come out of a convention. So they're saying, well, probably nothing would come out of this, but nothing's wrong with the Constitution. It's as if we're on Seinfeld discussing nothing, a non-solution to a non-problem. So either way you cut it, this is just not something that we want to go into.
I appreciate it. I'm going to ask some members if they have any questions from you. Okay, and we're really limited, so we appreciate you joining us from Evanston today, twice today. Appreciate your commitment and dedication. So thank you,
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and close public comment. And members, again, we'd love to sit here all weekend and talk about this, but we just can't. And we got to get this on the, if we're going to move it forward, we got to move it forward and we got to work the bill. So with that, we're going to close public comment. We're on Senate Joint Resolution 11. Members, what's your pleasure?
I'll move it.
Moved by Representative Zwanitzer. Seconded by Representative Oakley. Okay, members, let's work this resolution. We'll start on page 1. We're going to flip page by page. I just remind the audience too now, the process, if we do amend this, that's called a standing committee amendment. It has to be adopted by the full House, right? So some people think, this is the end of the game. This is only the beginning, right? Beginning in the second House. So, okay, we're on page 2. Any amendments?
Ask a question on page 2.
Oh, absolutely. Discussion on.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask what the limit, the power and jurisdiction of the federal government?
Tell us what line you're on.
That's on page 2, bottom of it, page 21, or line 21 and 22. It says limit the power and jurisdiction of the federal government. I'm just asking, what does that mean? Are we going to tell the BLM to go take a hike, or the Forest Service, or where are we? What does that mean?
Yeah, let's discuss that. I think that all, these are broad wipes here, but pose fiscal restraints, you could say, what does that mean? Limit power and jurisdiction. And then term limits. So those are broad, certainly. Intentionally broad. I know it's not an answer. We're just discussion. Okay, Representative Oakley, any?
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate what the representative is saying, because actually I think it is a specific concept to say impose fiscal restraint. It is a specific comment to concept to say limit the terms of office. But like limiting jurisdiction is a legal term that means something. Like what type of jurisdiction would we be discussing limiting, and probably have some answers, but I don't know if anybody on the panel has any idea, but not only is it a broad concept, I agree with the representative. I'm not sure what that means.
Okay. Any more discussion, or we're gonna keep moving, or are there amendments? And you could come back, I guess, if you want. Okay. You can come back if you please. Okay, we're gonna keep working amendments, page 2 on to page 3. Okay, flipping over to page 4. Any amendments on page 4? Okay, and then page 5. Okay, and then finally page 6. Okay, and I'll pause, members, any amendments before we call for the question? Okay.
Questions?
I think so. The question being called and I don't do a lot of this as chairman where we sit here and explain our vote and then you have to listen to us for 30 minutes. So we're not going to do that. But if you want to, we're all available to talk to any of you, right? You can grab us right outside the door. Got all our phone numbers on the legislative website, all those kind of things. But you're going to, and whatever happens with this bill, we'll just see here in a minute. But if it does go forward, it'll be referred to the House and then be put on the committee of the whole for further action. Okay, so with that question being called, please call the roll on Senate Joint Resolution 11. There are no amendments.
Representative Bear,
No.
Representative Byron,
Aye.
Representative Locke, Representative Northrup, Representative Oakley,
Aye.
Representative Storer,
No.
Representative Strock,
No.
Representative Zwanitzer, Chairman Harshman. The bill passes 5 ayes or no.
Thank you all for being here. We'll transition now to the next bill. Yeah.
Quick question for the sponsor, if he already has someone floor managing this. Is it me? Oh, good. Okay, just make sure.
Okay, let's transition a little bit. Senate File 136.
I'm telling you, this has been the worst thing I've done in a long time. Can I say this? I was gonna vote no. Oh.
So let's talk about time. It's 1:30. So, and this is pretty straightforward little bill, probably take you 10 minutes to present it, answer any questions from us, and then we'll open it up to the Department of Revenue and others. Probably take another 10 minutes. And then we're about 10 minutes till 2. And then we'll take about 10, 15 minutes in support of the bill and 10 minutes or so opposed to the bill. And I'll put the timer on and we'll go to work. It's a pretty straightforward issue. And then we'll work the bill, and we're going to arrive late to the floor of the House at about 2:15. So Senator Beitman, welcome back to the House Revenue, Senate File 136, floor is yours.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, bring to you today Senate File 136, Property Tax Relief Assessment Rate Reduction. All this does, like the chairman said, it's really straightforward. It's more or less a policy decision. This is one of your many tax relief bills that we've proposed this year. Try to give the folks back home some relief. What this does, actually, it was an idea I received from the good former Chairman Madden of this committee. He mentioned that the easiest thing to do to get relief to people is just lower the assessment rate. Wow, why didn't I think of that? I wish I could have taken credit for that idea. So simple. It's something that's constitutional, it's fair across the board, it's proportional, and it's something we can adjust up or down anytime we want. Thing is, it's never been adjusted since mid-80s when they put this in the statute. And in the mid-80s, they set it at 9.5% for the all other real and personal property class. You'll see in 13-103. The idea for this bill was originally the engrossed version has the rate knocked down to 8.5%. The original bill, I had it at 7.5%, thinking I could go down 2%. The good member from Bates Creek pointed out the constitutional provision of you got to be within 40%. And I said, oh, well, that's going to be a problem. So I amended it up 1% to 8.5% to be within the constitutional provisions there. So that's why it's set at 8.5%. You give that 1% reduction in the assessment rate multiplied by the assessed value gives you a little bit of, gives everybody a little bit of relief, and obviously it's proportional. So the more valuable your property is, the bigger the relief is. But across the board, it's fair, it's simple, it's something that we can adjust as we go. The Senate did decide to put a sunset on this bill. So you'll see on page 2, it sunsets after tax year 2025. So the legislature will have to come back. If they want to continue it at 8.5%, they're going to have to come back and take further action. So kind of put some sideboards on it. They've act as effective April 1st, 2023. And yeah, I'll stand for any questions, Mr. Chairman. That's all the bill does.
Okay, very good. Okay, members' questions. I just have a couple. I just want to talk the numbers on this. So 100,000 value at the 9.5% versus the 8.5%. What's I think I got the math on it. My little league math, I was just scratching here times 0.68, kind of that average mill. I mean, what kind of money are we talking about for 100,000? What kind of relief?
No, I had the fiscal note printed out, sir, but I didn't bring it with me. If you have the fiscal note, just cut it in half. Because that fiscal note that LSO provided to me when I drafted the bill
That's
was
a different question. I just
was
wanted
based on
just
the-
to- for that. If like you have a house worth 100,000
okay. Fair market value.
and now it goes from 9.5% assessed at 9,500 to 8,500. How much relief is that? And
let's do
I
some
think
math.
that, I think it drops, this is what I think, and I just want to throw this out, and then there's experts here in the room. I think it goes from about $650 a year for 100,000 to about 580 roughly. I'm getting nods back there. So about $68 per 100,000. And the average home now is about 316,000, so 300,000. So that to me, that's about $204 a year, the average Wyomingite. So that's $17 a month. Okay, but then the next question I have though, on this all other property, we're not talking about people's houses. So Walmart's gonna see a reduction as well. Right? Because they're not commercial. They're commercial, they're not industrial.
Correct.
Okay,
Commercial
so
and ag. So it'd
well,
be-
ag's valued on the,
okay, so okay, yeah, never mind.
ag will be on the production level, but I think, I just want to, I'm trying to get in my head what the amount is. And so I think for the average Wyoming night, it's about $17 a month. $204 a year for a $300,000 house. That's the average value in Wyoming roughly. I'm kind of asking a question, but I'm putting that out there and I'm seeing nods by the experts in the room, but. Okay, any other questions? Go ahead, Representative Oakley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just to follow up on that, do you have any numbers or have you done any research on? So not the residential, but like the commercial, like what those numbers as far as lost revenue would be?
Mr. Chairman, what I did was not per se lost revenue, but you can easily calculate that out. I took the 2019 ag, residential, commercial valuations, added them all up, and it was 7.8 billion. And I took the 2022 ag, residential, commercial, totaled them up, those assessed valuations, 10.6 billion. An increase of $2.795 billion, 36% increase in just those 3 years. That's how much our valuations have gone up. So we've been bringing in a lot more. We've been bringing almost $3 billion more in assessed valuations since 2019. It's a lot of money. This is trying to give some of that
Well,
money
that's
back
just
to the
assessed
taxpayers.
valuation. That's not the tax bill.
Well, yeah, you just multiply it by 9.5%, you get that and
Yes,
you
to the
take the mills
assessed
out, yeah.
Okay, but I think her question, this is good. I'm glad that's really good information, but then how much of that is residential out of that 2.79 billion? Do we know that?
That's a good question. Yeah, the residential in 2019 was 5.86 billion and change. And then 2022, it was 8.183 billion.
Okay.
So it went up $2.3 billion in 3
Okay,
years.
good. Thank you. That's good information. Good. Okay. Very good. Thank you, Senator.
Mhm.
Now, how about your handout? Is there anything on here you want to talk to us about? Is this your handout or maybe?
No,
it's
that's not mine.
Oh,
I
it's
didn't,
Department of Revenue. Okay,
Sure.
never mind. Sorry. Well, that's great. Okay, let's talk about the fiscal note.
okay.
And I don't know if I have it. Did you have copies of it? Or is it on the,
It's the last one.
it's on the initial version, the introduced version. Let me just find, I got it. Yeah, we got it. Got a little paper on the desk here.
Yeah, a little bit of
Turn a
paper,
little-
huh?
Okay. And so. Just. As I look at this fiscal note, which was at 7.5%.
Correct.
So to me, I think you add all those together, right? So that's 88 and 78. So about, was 190 million a year?
I don't have the fiscal note in front of me.
Okay.
Sorry.
And we can, maybe revenue can help us for that too.
Yeah, I'm sure they can help you and
But
just
it's gonna be half.
take these numbers and have them, and that's what
Yeah,
this bill would
okay,
do.
that's what. Okay, perfect. Well, good. Well, appreciate your explanation. Any more questions for the good senator? Representative Store.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Senator Bateman. Are you aware of how much of the property assessed that would be impacted by this is located in Teton County?
Go
Mr.
ahead,
Chairman,
Senator Biden.
Not off the top of my head, no. I'm sure Teton, I know Teton County's assessed valuation increase was probably the highest in the state, followed by Park County, I think Sheridan County. There's quite a few counties that were in the 20% plus range year over year. And I'm hearing that the assessed valuations probably for this year are going to be similar to that. So we're going to see another good sized spike in assessed valuations again. So that's the impetus behind the bill, is to try to take some of that extra money and provide relief to the taxpayers.
Okay, very good. Any other
Follow up?
questions? Oh, sure, certainly. Sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Bateman, I think it's about 22% of the total actually is Teton County, most of which is residential, but not includes the commercial as well. This does mean that for a home that's valued at 10.9 million, for example, that they would get about a $6,100 tax break. Is that the intention of this legislation?
Mr. Chairman, anytime you have a proportional rate, so a 9.5%, whatever you set a rate at, anytime you reduce the rate, it's going to reduce proportionally based on the value. So of course, the more valuable your property, the bigger the rate or bigger the dollar amount is going to be. But the reason why I did a simple rate reduction is, one, it's constitutional and it's allowed in statute. It's one of the few things we can tweak. It's one of the few levers we can actually pull without amending the Constitution, number one. And number two, lowering the rate or raising the rate is proportional. So it's fair. It's fair for everybody. So it's a proportional reduction based on value. So that's my argument on that.
Okay.
One more.
Yeah, well,
follow-up.
yeah, said no follow-up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just concerned about what might happen when the sunset provision goes into effect and everybody's taxes go back up. I'm worried that then we will have a true revolution on our hands.
Tax-mageddon,
Perhaps. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I did push back against the sunset for that reason, because I believe the 67th, we can set our tax policy however we want it. If we decide as a body that 8.5 is where we need to be, that's where we land on, so be it. I don't think that the 68th or 69th should have to, they can always come in and decide whatever they need the rate to be. So if they like it at 8.5, they can leave it alone. That's why I didn't like the sunset idea. I think it should just be, we're going to set our policy as the 67th. This is what we think is the right place to be at this time. And if a legislature in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now decides, 8.5 doesn't sound so good, maybe we need to lower it again, because if assessed values keep going up and go up even further, we're gonna have to keep ratcheting that rate down, or else the bills are gonna be through the roof. Your tax bills are gonna, even at 8.5%, the amount of money that you're gonna be paying is gonna be extremely high at a high valuation. Because if valuations keep going up, we're gonna have to keep ratcheting down the assessed valuation in order to provide relief to our taxpayers. And if vice versa, if they start going down and if everything crashes, we may have to raise it to be able to fund our government.
I think the issue though is that 40% with industrial.
Correct.
I don't think anybody's ready to start, I think you got to be really, the other area obviously is mills, number of mills. And even though we're at the modern state history low point of mills, because we don't bond school Capcom anymore. That's another way to think about this. I think that our joint committee will probably continue to talk about. And of course, county commissioners can do that right now. Some have, but interesting. Okay, good discussion. I appreciate it. And I think we better get the Department of
Yeah, I
Revenue up here
appreciate you
next.
guys.
And
I'll hang around in case you have any.
Yeah,
questions.
yeah, you're not off the hook yet, so hang around, appreciate it. Okay, thank you. Director Hempton, welcome to the committee. This is your handout. Okay, very good.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Brenda Henson, Director of the Department of Revenue. As stated, the engrossed version of the bill is different than the original bill, and so I felt it important to provide updated fiscal information. On the front page of your document, you'll just see that I have taken for each of the 23 counties, the 2022 agricultural value, and that is specific to land only. 2022 residential, 2022 commercial, and then to provide the total of all other, that tier assessed value, which equates to a little over $12.5 billion. I then took the statewide mill levy average, 68.174, and then just basically calculated, had the level of assessment been 8.5% as opposed to the 9.5%, what would the estimated tax revenue loss be? And that's where you'll see in column number 7 that approximately $90 million. Now, keeping in mind, I'm using a statewide average mill levy that includes the school foundation, the 25 mills to school districts, the 6 mill county fee for schools, along with the other special districts, local government. And then what I did in the last 3 columns is just projected a 3.5% increase in assessed value each year and approximately what that loss would be. Informational purposes only. The second page is just to get down to what does it mean to a taxpayer. I used $300,000 in the example, and I used the 9.5% versus an 8.5% to just show what that calculation is. And the reduction in the tax bill would have been $205 for that $300,000 home. I'm trying to just make it, and then I just said, okay, and if that home were to appreciate 3.5% each year, then that would be, now keeping in mind, any tax dollar savings to a taxpayer is revenue reduction for the taxing entities. One and the same. My comment that I really wanted to make is this is a function that changing the 9.5% to 8.5% can be accomplished very easily with the statewide computer assisted mass appraisal system. We'll do it at the Department of Revenue in all 23 counties. We could have it done this afternoon. That's a very easy step to take for 2023. The only thing that I would caution is that Wyoming statute requires that county assessors send out notices of value or assessment schedules no later than the 4th Monday in April. So you've got county assessors out there right now that are finalizing their values, meaning appraised values. The level of assessment can be applied to that, but assessment schedules need to have that percentage on there because that taxable value is important when you take last year's mill levy and provide the taxpayer with an estimated tax based on last year's mill levy. So time is of the essence. With that, just some clarification that we are talking in the residential, you're talking not only site-built homes, apartment buildings, mobile homes, those would all be included in that residential value. Commercial values, that's everything from, a small commercial filling station to telecommunications. So those assessments that we do at the Department of Revenue for telecommunications, cable, satellite TV, those are all also included in the 9.5%. The other types of properties that we value at the Department of Revenue are all at the industrial classification. But that commercial piece that you'll see that in 2022, a little over $2 billion in assessed value, it really does run the gambit of all income producing properties that are not considered industrial. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Quickly, sometime on that chart, you check out Weston County, and unless they have, I don't know, a Tesla manufacturing plant, I think some of those numbers might be off. So on your chart, it looks like $16 million, and I can't imagine that's correct. So
I will definitely go back and research it. I look at a lot of numbers every day, but I want them to be accurate. And if this document is incorrect, I will get back with you.
All right,
Mr. Chairman.
just a question, so you used that 300,000 value, how many what percentage of homes are in Wyoming are under 300,000? I mean, is it 80% of the homes, 50%? I mean, that's the average. Well, we know we got the richest county in the world. That changes the average. We have 8 counties that don't even have $1 million residents.
Mr. Chairman, I apologize. I didn't bring my documentation from the property tax refund program, but that is where that information, because we calculate the median residential property tax bill. And so if you've got that information in your file somewhere, that will give you the median residential property tax bill for each of the 23 counties.
Yeah, okay, and then just a question while you're here on the fiscal note. So, and I was just looking at in your blue columns, you got the 92 million, that might be a little bit. So really it's around 80 to 90 million a year, this program.
Mr. Chairman, and as stated, the original fiscal note,
Right,
these
it's
numbers
half.
do reflect approximately half
Yeah,
of that.
half that. Okay, very good. Representative Storer has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I calculated about a 10.5% reduction overall with the engrossed version of the bill. And the state of Wyoming's residential property tax is one of the lowest already in the country. I'm just wondering if you had calculated like how much lower it might go with this provision. As a
Mr.
percent of
Chairman,
value.
I guess I have not done any research related to how we would rank. As stated, depending on which survey you look at, we're typically within the bottom 3. We have the lowest tax. We're one of the lowest in the nation. I would say that on commercial property, we are the friendliest state in the nation for commercial property taxation currently with our current statutory requirements.
Thank you.
Okay, very good.
Thank you, Mr.
We have
Chairman.
County Assessor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ken Gill, Laramie County Assessor. The Assessors Association, this bill came out after we met, but just in a straw poll from our president, we took really no position on this bill. It truly is tax policy for you. You've had this tool, and if you'll remember, 2 or 3 years ago, we were looking at raising this assessment level from 9.5 to 11.5 in the all other property category. So it wasn't long ago that we actually had some proposals out there in front of joint interim during that time period. I would bring attention and just not to repeat what the director said. This is effective April 1st, 2023. Laramie County is planning on sending out our assessment schedules March 22. And I'm sure there's a few other counties before April. So if maybe you could make this effective when it becomes law, or however you do that, however you wordsmith that, that would be appreciated, at least by me, one county for sure. I'd stand for any questions.
Any questions, Assessor? Okay, thank you for being
Thanks,
here
sir.
today. Thank you. Okay, just, here's where I'm at on this. Let me just take the temperature in the room. Those who want to speak in favor of the bill, just hold your hand up. Okay, those who want to speak against the bill. Okay, and then I think we'll just take people speaking on the bill. How do we do, and then we'll just take it one at a time. We won't do the for and against. I think so here's where we're at. It's 1:53. So let's keep this rolling for about 15 more minutes, and then we'll have to go to work on this bill. Is that good? I looked around, there's about that many hands maybe. So if you just fill these seats and introduce yourselves and tell us who you represent and your position on the bill, and we appreciate you being here, and there's another one right there. Yeah. Okay. Why don't we just start, and this brevity is appreciated.
Okay.
Okay,
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Ashley Harp Street, Wyoming Taxpayers Association. Again, our mission is to advocate for sound tax policy for a healthy Wyoming economy. WTA believes sound tax policy is framed by a tax structure that is justified, equitable, stable, and transparent, just as new taxes or increases in existing taxes should meet a cornerstones analysis. We believe that rate reductions should be analyzed on the merits to be included in Wyoming's tax structure. Again, I'd like to make it clear, WTA is very sympathetic to the increased valuations some of the residential taxpayers have faced, and we've been very supportive of House Bill 99, Property Tax Refund Program, and House Bill 121, Property Tax Deferral Program amendments, both that you guys passed. However, we feel this is not the vehicle to address this specific and circumstantial issue, as this rate reduction does not provide targeted relief. It is not means tested or qualified. It is not justified, as according to the Tax Foundation, in 2020, Wyoming ranked 46th out of 50th for the lowest taxes paid for owner-occupied housing. In 2022, Wyoming had the second lowest taxes paid in residential taxes in the Rocky Mountain region, according to Wyoming Department of Revenue and Lincoln Land Institute. And I sent those to you earlier in an email, Mr. Chairman. But Mr. Chairman, the biggest reason we cannot support this exemption and is not, or reduction, is it's not stable or sound tax policy, as this bill will take revenue from a stable revenue resource in our tax code, which will result in making the tax structure even more unstable as a whole. Wyoming's tax structure is already unbalanced, and this reduction will further erode the base and shift the cost of critical services to other taxpayers. For example, per Wyoming Economic Analysis Division, for a 3-person family with an income of $67,000 and owning a home valued at $290,000, they pay $3,990 in taxes and receive back in services $27,550. That means for every dollar the individual taxpayer contributes, we receive back as $6.90 in services. I think that's a pretty good deal. We all know this rate reduction will shift the burden of the spending to other taxpayers, specifically our legacy industries. Finally, there are no measurable benefits that will provide analysis of the blanketed reduction to all the residential taxpayers who receive this benefit. Mr. Chairman and committee, we appreciate the desire for action, and we stand ready to assist in the evaluation of proposals in the interim that address the unbalanced tax structure that are low and broad-based. Our suggestion is to do a comprehensive study of the tax structure similar to Tax Reform 2000, created by the 1997 Senate Enrolled Act 56. If the legislature goes down this path, it could be taken up in the interim, much like a select committee that can solely focus on the topic at hand. With that, Mr. Chairman, as we were in the late 90s, we stand ready to assist, and I can stand for questions. Right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Kelly Little. I'm with the Wyoming Association of Conservation Districts. Conservation districts in Wyoming are allowed to receive 1 mil of revenue if that is voted in by the voters on the ballot. Currently, there are 24 conservation districts out of 34 that receive up to 1 mil of mill levy revenue, some of them less than that. I did some math, and with this proposal, the conservation districts would see a reduction based on 2022 numbers, assessed valuation numbers over the next annually, I guess, about around $500,000 spread out across the state. Now, that may not seem like a very big number, but for conservation districts that have very low budget amounts and they're just received the 1 mil, it is quite a bit of their operating budgets. So with that, I just want to provide that information for you all as a special district that just receives a small amount of mill levy revenue. With that, I will take questions. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, good afternoon. My name is Erin Taylor. I represent the Wyoming Association of Community College Trustees. So again, you're hearing from the folks who utilize these tax revenues. And I appreciate the sentiment of the bill. And I've been doing this job for a long, long time. So we've seen bills like this before. But I appreciate the balanced conversation that it isn't just about giving the property tax relief. You also have to consider those who utilize those revenues. I won't get into a lot of the details about how community colleges are funded because they do have other sources. They receive state aid. They have an element of tuition. but those local revenues are a stable source of revenue for the colleges. And without other levers to pull, if you will, to use those terms, this would definitely have a fiscal impact on your community colleges at a time when they are stepping up to train our workforce and do more things around the state. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll keep my comments brief. Happy to dive in more if there are questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Brett Moline, Wyoming Farm Bureau. Sitting in support of this bill, it's been mentioned before, but this is a policy decision for you folks. Do you want to give for 3 years some small relief to the any other category, including the downtown businesses, agriculture, and the commercial and ag, residential and commercial? That's a decision, and we would ask you to support this bill to give for 3 years a small relief package to these members of our community. With that, Mr. Chairman, I would sit for any questions. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Jeremiah Riemann here on behalf of the Wyoming County Commissioners Association. We are in strong opposition to this particular piece of legislation. I won't repeat many of the comments that have been provided previously. I wanted to focus a little bit on the real impact of this and how important this funding, property tax funding, is to many of your communities. I'm going to refer to the slides that I've given to you previously. If you need me to give those to you again, I'm happy to. But as I've stated before the committee, 19 of our counties currently depend on the all other category of property tax assessment for 25% or more of their budget. There are 12 counties that depend on that category for 50% or more. I'll just mention a few of those: Albany, Bighorn, Fremont, Goshen, Johnson, Platte, Uinta, Washakie, Weston. These things really do matter. And if I can put that into a little bit of dollars and cents for a couple of those counties, 82% of the all other category makes up property taxes in Albany County. That equates to a measly $5.6 million that they then utilize to provide services. In Bighorn County, it's 53% of their property taxes for $1.6 million. So we're cutting on some razor thin edges here. I previously provided you the example of Washakie County, which depends on this category for 70% of its property tax collections. And 25% of their entire budget is made up of direct distribution and payment in lieu of taxes, two things that are never guaranteed in any one particular year. They depend on property taxes for the next 18% of their budget, or $1.679 million. Again, not a whole lot. So that's 43% of their entire budget is these three categories. So it does matter. I did hear reference to the change in assessed valuation between 2019 and 2022. And Representative Storr brought a question to my mind that I went and quickly did the math on. For the residential category change between 2019 and 2022, Teton County made up 47% of that change across the state. One county was 47%. If you looked at Teton County's change in residential alone against the all other category change, they made up 39% of that change. So Teton County had an oversized influence on that assessed valuation change. And I think we all understand why that happened, and certainly understand the pinch that many people are feeling in Teton County in particular, and not to discount that others aren't. We are supportive of other things that are moving through this session. The only other thing that I'll mention is that because of the way that this bill is structured, you heard the director talk about that it's effective right after this legislative session ends. Counties are beginning to start their budgeting process. So this is now going to take 10 to 11 or 12% out of their budget from the all other category of assessed valuation. So time is of the essence if this is going to move, because it does have an impact. With that, Mr. Chairman, I would stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Fryman, you stated that the counties depend on this. It's a nice stable tax revenue source. But we've heard a calculation from the chairman that it's about $17 a month for a taxpayer, that they would be getting some relief back. And we've heard that there's been increases across all 23 counties in assessment. So do you believe that this is a small thing, as we've heard from the taxpayer side of things, or is it a big thing as you're presenting here for the counties?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Bear, you're correct. It might be a small thing for an individual homeowner. On the whole, because this doesn't just affect residential, it affects agriculture, commercial, and all other parts of this. It's a pretty big add to the overall impact. $87 million a year is my calculation off of what has been presented over 3 different years. That's $260 million out of our tax structure. So as I presented in this committee previously, there are a lot better ways for us to give much higher relief to individuals than giving them $17 under the property tax refund program. We might be able to give them over $1,000 in some situations in terms of relief. So I just think this is a bad tax policy if that's our intention, is to get relief to citizens that's meaningful.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So do you have an idea of the percentage that the counties are going to be giving up, just statewide, what this cut would be? Because we know it's a pretty small percentage, about 10% maybe, that taxpayers get back. Is it a 10% cut for the counties? And considering the increase that we've seen over the years recently, isn't this really just a cut in the rate of increase?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Bear, in terms of the impact, 87, let's just use $87 million as the annual impact. Counties receive roughly 17% of all property taxes that are collected in a given year. So you can begin to kind of break that down. If you just take that against that 90 million, I think you're looking at about, I've had $14.79 million spread across all of the counties. How much that's going to impact each individual county depends on how dependent they are on this particular category. For a county like yours, this is a speed bump. For others, it's a big impact, as I've referenced, depending on how dependent they are on that particular category.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Riemann, if the state were to backfill and make up the difference for the counties, could you then support the bill?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Oakley, with a backfill, I think we would at least moderate our opposition. I still think it's bad tax policy, but I don't know that we would oppose it at that point in time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I realize you have somewhere else that you need to be. For the record, David Fraser, Executive Director, Wyoming Association of Municipalities. And a lot has already been said on the subject. I don't believe I need to be redundant, but I did feel that I needed to be on the record that this is very concerning to our members for all the reasons that have been said, especially echo what Mr. Riemann has just presented to you. I will also indicate that we're supportive of some of the other measures that you're looking at that would bring more targeted relief to those who need that specific relief. We're supportive of that effort. And if you did proceed with this, obviously we'd encourage you to look at the backfill and encourage you to do that if you do this. But again, I also agree with Mr. Raymond's opinion that this is probably not the way to get the relief to the folks who need it. And it would certainly upset a lot of apple carts that don't need to be upset on its way to doing that. With that, I would certainly stand for any questions, but again, would urge you to look at more targeted things that aim at helping the people that need the help. I also would just urge the caution that in a state I formerly worked in the same capacity, they did some property tax relief that had some really long-lasting impacts that they didn't anticipate. So where this problem, where the market might do some correcting to this problem down the road, I would encourage you to think about what long-term impacts you may be getting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Conrado Saldivar, President of the Wyoming Library Association. I will be very brief. Just one example to give you that probably speaks to a lot of our county library systems. This one is from Albany County Library. They did have a chance to look to see how they would be impacted by the 8.5%. They would see 80,000 to 90,000, a reduction of 80 to 90,000 in their budget. And the director stated that while she does her best to avoid cutting people when facing budget restrictions, she doesn't know how she can absorb $80,000 without cutting a position. A lost position would directly cascade into reduced library hours, for example, no morning hours or only open 5 days a week, and reduced programming. Another way to frame this, the reduction is equal to our total materials and programming budgets combined. So libraries will definitely see this ripple effect as it goes across, whether that's people or services that libraries provide. I can stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sir, thank you for being here to testify. The library that you mentioned, the cut would result in $80,000 to $90,000. What is their total budget for the year?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me find that. Representative Bear, for 2023, they have reported from Mills, they get just over $1 million, and from other local government funds, just over $59,000. And that was Albany County Public Library.
Turn my mic on. We're going to close public testimony now. Appreciate everybody being here and your testimony. Okay, members, we have Senate File 136 and Gross before us. What's your pleasure on the bill? Been moved by Representative Strzok. There's a second? Seconded by Representative Locke. Okay, members, let's move over to page 2, I think, where most of I just want to make sure on line 7 on page 2 that Romanet 6 and 9, that's the telecommunications cable TV that's in that part of the statute, along with all other property. I'm seeing the head nod. Okay, so, okay, very good. Okay, any amendments here? Okay, move on page 2. Okay, page 3, Representative Oakley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure how to do this, but my motion to amend is to add an appropriation for the backfill. So I don't know if we set that amount, whether, and I'll take direction from you and your experience, whether that's $87 million a year, or if the backfill is actually done, that it's just worded whatever at the time. I don't know how that's done.
I think LSO, okay, it's seconded for discussion. I think LSO can solve that problem for us. There's a couple ways to do it. You can put a number, we'll put a number in there and then be distributed out of the LSRA, I guess, for that. So, but the number will be, somewhere around 300 million for 3 years. Be a little less than that, we think. Okay, so there's a second. Any further discussion? I think we all understand that, and we'll get our attorneys to make sure it's right. Okay, question on the backfill. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Okay, that's been adopted. Okay, any other amendments? Representative Byron?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to move an amendment to page 3, line 6, And maybe the bringer of the bill can also speak on this and make it effective immediately.
Yeah.
And I have the language for that, or if that's good, yeah, and I can get you that language. It would change page 3, line 6 to read this act as, and I'll get this to you, this act is effective immediately upon completion of all acts necessary for the bill to become law as provided in Article 4, Section 8 of the Wyoming Constitution. So I will get that to you just so
Standard
everyone
language,
can
yeah.
hear it. But
Is there a second? Second by Oakley, okay. Okay, all those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Okay, that's been adopted. Okay, any other amendments on the bill? Okay, Representative Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just would like to strike the language on page 2, lines 21 through 23, where we have a sunset on it, as well as page 2, lines 8 through 10. I
Okay,
move that motion.
0 second,
I'll second it.
seconded by Representative Locke. Discussion, go ahead. Representative Oakley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this was obviously discussed some, and I come to the exact opposite conclusion of some of the testimony we heard saying we don't, that the 67th can decide and we don't have to wait for the 68th or 9th, but I think that's exactly what this does is have, you know, having us do this right now, and the sunset goes into effect. And then at that time, they can review whether, I mean, we might go into recession, prices go down. At that point, they can assess the current situation and make the appropriate decision. So we don't know what's going to happen. We also heard testimony about how a couple of years ago, we were looking at increasing the percentage. So the reality is that decision should be and needs to be made at the appropriate time. So I think the sunset is a good thing. And I think, so anyway, against the amendment.
Anybody else in discussion? Representative Bear?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that we look at this quite wrongly. If we have a recession, the taxpayers are going to be suffering as well. And government, like the taxpayers, should be looking at tightening their belts, and removing this sunset puts a lot more impetus on government tightening their belts. So on and for the amendment.
Please call the roll, Ms. Clifford.
Representative Bear,
Aye.
Representative Byron,
aye.
Representative Locke, Representative Northrup, Representative Oakley.
Aye.
Representative Storer cast a no vote. Representative Strock,
Aye.
Representative Swanitzer cast a no vote, absentee. Chairman Harshman. Thank you. Right.
For it. Hey, thank you, Senator. Appreciate you. Bill, thank you everyone for here. The committee is adjourned. Okay.